Hello there, and time for us to get stuck into our 11th episode now of Land of the Rising Scrum. The weeks are ticking down and we're working our way through every single team heading to Japan this September for the Rugby World Cup. If you want to catch up on any of our previous 10 episodes, you can listen back on offtheball.com/podcasts. From there, just click into our rugby section, and you can also watch these back on YouTube as well, on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/offtheball. And a reminder as well, our rugby coverage on Off the Ball is brought to you by Vodafone. Team of us, everyone in. Now, last week we started Pool C, where we spoke to 2003 World Cup winner Neil Back. And this week we're actually going to skip ahead onto Pool D, because we've had the chance to speak to some Welsh rugby royalty this afternoon. And joining us on the line now is Wales's record try scorer, a veteran of 3 World Cups, 87 test appearances for Wales and 58 tries. Shane Williams, welcome to the show.
Cheers, very good to be here.
Now, you're doing some work with the tourist boards over in Japan, in Osaka and Kobe. So Irish fans are going to be heading to Kobe for their World Cup meeting with Russia. What are they going to be expecting over there?
With Japan, I think just expect uniqueness. I think it's just an incredible place. Kobe itself, one of my favourite cities in Japan. Actually, get down there and certainly try the beef. Kobe beef, I know everyone talks about it. If you can get down there and just try some of that, it's unreal, I can assure you. So, but just the whole experience of it all, the nightlife there, the fact that you've got your onsens down there, get your natural springs and things like that, things we don't have in the Amman Valley, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And just the restaurants and the food down there is just unreal, I can assure you. That's apart from the rugby. The rugby's going to be great as well. The hospitality is going to be unbelievable, and the support's going to be amazing. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to love it. Yeah,
I think a lot of rugby fans over here in particular are just looking forward to heading over, really, because it's such a far-flung place. It's far from the usual place. We've had World Cups in New Zealand and in the traditional countries, in England last time round, in Wales and Ireland as well. Various matches have been on in France. But Japan is just such a distant place for so many people who haven't seen it. You spent a bit of time in Japan during your career as well. That's your link to the country. Not a lot of Northern Hemisphere players have ventured over there. We're going to see a lot of Southern Hemisphere guys going over after this World Cup, and it would have happened after previous tournaments as well. But what kind of attracted you over there? It was when you finished up your Test career with Wales around 2012, wasn't it?
Yeah, I finished in 2012, obviously with Wales and the Ospreys at the time, and I was fully prepared to retire, I got to be honest with you. But I had this kind of opportunity from Mitsubishi Heavy Industries that got in touch and wanted me to be ambassador in Japan. Initially, I thought, I didn't know much about Japan, I got to be honest. I'd been on tour in 2001 and enjoyed the experience, but didn't know much about the club rugby scene there. So I went over and just kind of on a trial run then to see what it was all about. And straight away, I was made to feel really welcome, and I was made to feel part of this club and the company in which the club played. I quickly fell in love with the country. The rugby was, for me, I was at a lower standard, but which meant for me that, I didn't have to worry about, people criticising what I was doing out there. I wasn't an international rugby player anymore, so I didn't have to read on a Monday morning my marks out of 10 on the papers. And it was just such a relaxed environment, and it didn't take me very long really to fall in love with the country and take my family out there and just enjoy the whole experience. And it's a very unique country in the sense that, rugby isn't their number one sport. You've got basketball, you've got baseball, you've got soccer, volleyball, sumo, etc. come before it. But they were a country that wanted to learn about rugby, and since 2011, 2012, it's grown massively there, and everyone's really excited about a World Cup in which it's going to be unique compared to any other World Cup we've ever seen. So it's exciting times for Japan.
Now, your own kind of what we've been doing on this segment is kind of chatting through the World Cup journeys people have had down the years. Your own one started with Wales in 2003. You've had some mixed ones down the years, 2003, then the disappointment of 2007, 2011, beating Ireland in the quarter-final, and it kind of left a what-if, I suppose, against France. But we might start with 2003, because I spoke to Neil Back last week about England winning the World Cup, and obviously you played against them in the quarter-final. Gave them a massive scare. It obviously didn't work out in the end, but I think for you personally, that was your breakout tournament. It felt like you hadn't really played for Wales for 2 years up until then. And if you look at kind of your Test appearances from then, it was pretty much in the team consistently until you retired.
Yeah, look, 2003 New Zealand game certainly was the turning point in my career. I'd been given my first opportunity in 2000, played Six Nations, thought I'd done particularly well, but then just got dropped from the squad by Steve Hansen, and it was a difficult 2 years for me, I've got to be honest, but I managed to kind of scrape my way back into the squad for the World Cup, and didn't play in any of the pool stages. And we'd already qualified for the quarterfinals, so I think I kind of was just thrown in there to make up the numbers, if I'm honest, against New Zealand. And I just thought, look, Shane, if you don't play well today, you're probably never going to play for Wales again. So just give it your all, get involved in the game, see what happens. Lucky enough for me, it went particularly well for me personally. Wales went out there and played some fantastic rugby, really put the All Blacks to the sword. Scored lots of tries. Unfortunately, we forgot that we had to defend in that game as well, and conceded a lot as well. All of a sudden, I was back in that team. I played in the quarterfinals, a game in which I still believe we should have beaten England, but didn't. I will get over it one day, and the rest was history. I realised then that I had to play well every game for Wales, or I'd be dropped again, and that was the turning point certainly. And I never looked back after that.
Yeah, you said there, like, the getting in against New Zealand, and you kind of thought it was now or never, really. Like, did you really actually feel that way, that even looking back, if you hadn't got that break in the World Cup in 2003, it could have been a long, long time before you got the opportunity again?
I think if I didn't play against New Zealand, obviously I wouldn't have had that. I don't think I would have been the player I was. I was kind of, I come to the point where it was a tough 2 years before that, and I thought, why aren't I in this Welsh team? And then at the end, I was thinking, look, you're not good enough to be in this Welsh team. So when I eventually got back into the squad, I thought, right, Shane, you've got to prove a few people wrong here, because there's a lot of people that don't want you in this team. and it was the coach at the time, unfortunately, as well. So I went out there, I thought, look, just do something different here. Just give it your all. Come off that field shattered. And if you're not picked in the team the following week, then so be it. I'll be happy with that. And yeah, so I don't think if I hadn't played well in that game, I don't think I probably would have played for Wales, certainly for a very long time, if not ever again. And I'm just glad really that I just gave it my all. I absolutely played my heart out and give it everything I could. And I gave the coach little choice then afterwards, that I felt that he had to pick me against England, and it was exactly the same kind of feeling going into that game. I knew that, if I didn't play well in this game, he could turn around and say, well, it was a one-off and I'm not going to pick him again. So every game after that, it was like it was my last game. And, and it just went on from there, really. And I got better as the confidence came with it.
And you mentioned coach at the time, Steve Hansen, who obviously is the New Zealand coach at the moment, departing after the Rugby World Cup. Looking back on the early 2000s when he was with Wales, are you kind of surprised, or kind of did you just expect that the success would have arrived for him? What type of a character was he to work with?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. He was a very he was Sergeant Major kind of authority. It was pretty much my way or the highway, and sometimes that works with coaches. Unfortunately for me at the time in 2001, his way was not the Shane Williams way, and
it was the highway.
It was the highway, yeah, exactly. And it was a long highway for me for some time. But he's certainly, he was a very good coach. He got the best out of the Welsh team even back then, and I think it was a matter of time before he started winning things. Especially when you're coaching the best team in the world, they still need guidance, and he was certainly ahead of his time. I can assure you that. So not once have I turned around and said that he wasn't a good coach, because he's won 2 World Cups, so he knows what he's doing with a good group of lads as well. But me and Steve probably didn't say eye to eye initially, because obviously when you're not selected in the team, he's not going to be your best mate. Let's be honest. But after that, we became very close when I got back into the Welsh team again, and I realised that what he did probably made me the player I was eventually. So. We still keep in touch. I had the privilege of catching up with him in the Lions tour a couple of years back as well, and seeing how he was doing there. And we've kept in touch since. So he's certainly someone I probably owe a lot to, in a strange kind of way, really. But he is some coach, and I think even though he had a very good All Blacks team there, they were an All Blacks team that probably underachieved in previous World Cups. So. he just gave them that little bit extra top 2 inches really at times where, when the going got tough, they could beat the likes of France and Australia and go on and win the World Cup. So he's done a great job. 2007,
beaten by Fiji, didn't get out of the pool stages. Like, in short, what went wrong? Because 2007 as well, from an Irish point of view, was a World Cup we'd like to pretend never happened as well. But equally across the water in Wales, it was a disaster.
Yeah, it was obviously a disaster. No one likes to be going home before the quarterfinals, and I think we probably thought we were in the quarterfinals before even getting there. I think that was the big issue. We played some good rugby in that World Cup. Personally, I was playing some. I just come back from a couple of operations, and I'd had a good pre-season, and I was fit, and probably, ironically, played some of my best rugby in that World Cup. But yeah, it just wasn't to be. We turned up for that Fiji game. Probably thought we'd won the match before we'd even kicked off. A little bit arrogant in that sense. Tried playing rugby that suited Fiji, throw the ball around, offloading the tackle, make a lot of mistakes, and Fiji capitalised. And what you don't do against a Fijian side is make mistakes, knock the ball on, give them the ball, and give them opportunities. And that's what we did. And straight away we were chasing the game. Probably one of the best games of rugby you're going to watch as a neutral, but not as a Welshman. So. And being part of that was massively frustrating, and so the better team won on the day, and I'd like to think that we learned a lot from that. But look, no one likes going home from a World Cup early, especially when you're already preparing to go to Marseille and play South Africa. I think that was the issue really, and difficult. A lot of bad things come from that because the following day, as we got into Cardiff, Gareth Jenkins was almost pretty much sacked on the spot as well, which wasn't good for the players or for Gareth as. He was a mate of ours as well as a coach as well. So it wasn't a good time for us all really. But, I think we learned from it. We ended up getting a very good coach after that.
And within a few months you were Grand Slam champions.
Yes, exactly. So that's Welsh rugby for you, isn't it? We've got ups and downs, that's for sure.
Now, as we mentioned, Warren Gatland came in. The Grand Slam followed a few months later, and all going quite well under Warren Gatland. Brings us up to 2011, which was your final World Cup. And I imagine a degree of mixed feelings because such a narrow defeat to France in the semi-finals after Sam Warburton's red card. First, though, I might ask about you inflicted another World Cup quarter-final defeat on Ireland, which is essentially the theme of Irish Rugby World Cups. Was that a case where, it was 2 minutes in, you got your try on that day against Ireland? Was it from then pretty much, you never really looked back? You almost had Ireland at arm's length for pretty much all of that game after that?
Yeah, it was a strange one really. That World Cup, we were super confident going into that World Cup. We'd had a good pre-World Cup training a couple of weeks down in Poland. The lads were fit, they were strong, we were feeling really good, and the confidence within the camp was oozing, it really was. And I hadn't experienced anything like that. And when we got to the quarters and we had Ireland, the talk was that it was going to be physical battle up front. The likes of Sam Warburton versus O'Brien and these guys was a huge competition, and that was where the game was going to be won and lost. And likes of Sam Warburton, Lydiat, and these guys just played their socks off. They really did, and we started the game well, which is always a bonus. And I think we won the physical battle, which is always difficult against the likes of O'Brien and these guys as well. So, straight away from that game, we were confident. We were super confident anyway going into that game. And I don't think we ever looked back. I don't know if it's arrogant to say, but as soon as we started that game so well, we didn't really think we were going to lose that match, which is bizarre to say against Ireland as well, because it was so easy to lose against them, and it has been since. So, we were such a, I don't know, we just thought really that the big things were going to happen in that World Cup, and we felt the same as well going into the French game. We really did. We felt we were the better team than France. We felt that physically we were going to dominate France, and that we had enough firepower behind to put France to the sword, and almost looking ahead to the World Cup final, not in an arrogant way, but in a confident kind of way. And after we beat Ireland, we felt that we'd beaten one of the toughest sides in this World Cup. We didn't think France were as good as Ireland, and we were going to do the same against the French. And obviously, circumstances changed that slightly, but we still believe we were the better team on the day and should have won that semi-final against France. So when people ask me, any regrets about that game and the incident with Sam and Vincent Clerc, well, the only thing any of the lads will say is that we still should have won that game with 14 men and didn't. And a problem is in quarterfinals or semi-finals, if you don't quite do it in the 80 minutes, you're heading home. And unfortunately for me and the rest of the team, that's what happened.
And does that kind of feeling of regret just kind of get heightened when you see how close France ran New Zealand in the final itself?
Yeah, massively. I think, as far as we're concerned, New Zealand probably played their worst game in the final. People who say as well, France almost deserved to have won that World Cup, which is crazy, really, because they probably didn't play their best rugby in that World Cup either. They had a couple of scalps, lost a couple of games as well, and did well to get to that final. So when we got back and touchdown in Heathrow there, and we're looking back, we were thinking, guys, we could be world champions now. We could be holding the World Cup because we were good enough to. Despite the how poorly maybe New Zealand played in the final, we truly believe we had a good enough squad to win that World Cup. And that's the one thing that bites me on the backside is when I go back and think about it, is like that was definitely the one that got away from me because we were good enough. I knew personally for me I wasn't going to play in another World Cup, so I wasn't going to have that opportunity again. And unfortunately it wasn't to be, but it still stings. Let's put it that way.
And finally, Shane, bringing us up to 2019 now, how are Wales' chances coming into this? Grand Slam winners earlier this campaign, Warren Gatlin's final outing with Wales as well. He's always a man that likes a big plan, one final hurrah for him. When you see how Australia fared maybe last weekend in the opening round of the Rugby Championship, weren't that impressive. They've had their problems as well in the last year. Do you think they have a good shot at winning it?
Look, it's good a chance as any, I think. You got to look at, they've got the momentum. They're hitting this World Cup running. They're 14 games unbeaten. They've beaten some of the best teams in the world. A Grand Slam against some very good England side. Ireland as well. Mixed emotions there in the way they've played. But they've got to be confident. They've got to be super confident. They got into a World Cup thinking, we're one of the favourites to win it. And you've got to embrace that really and enjoy that, enjoy the pressure, and go on there and do what you can to win it. And I think players like Alan Wynne that are playing particularly well, likes of Talupa Faletau, coming back into the squad. You got Jonathan Davis in good form, etc., etc. This team is capable of big things. Strength in depth, good squad, and full of confidence. So. It's nice that Wales can go into a World Cup, as one of the favourites, because as far as I can remember, that's never happened before. So they've got to embrace that. They've beaten some great sides to get to where they are at the moment. Australia, I thought, they haven't had a very good 12 months with things happening behind the scenes as well. Probably not the strength in depth that we're used to seeing in Australian rugby. But again, never write them off. As Welshmen, we're never going to write them off. But, you look at the way the South Africa are playing, New Zealand are always going to be there, Ireland, England. Yeah, there's so many teams that can win this World Cup as well. But Wales have got to be super confident this time and, stay away from any injuries of the lads. And I think we're going to be okay.
Okay, Shane, thanks a million for joining us on Off the Ball and Land of the Rising Scrum, and hope you enjoy the World Cup.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you very much.
Yes, that was Shane Williams speaking to us there on Land of the Rising Scrum. Now, next up to cover Wales as well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by a broadcaster with the BBC, BT Sport and Premier Sports, and an author as well, Ross Harries. Thanks a million for joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Wales Grand Slam champions, we were just discussing there with Shane Williams. Greatest ever winning run at the moment. Best Wales team ever to go to a World Cup, in your estimation at the moment? I'll start off with an easy one, I'll start off with an easy question.
In Wales, I don't know what it is about the national psyche. I think people like to perhaps look on the negative a bit too often, but as you've just listed there, it's very difficult to be anything other than optimistic at the moment for all those reasons. Grand Slam champions, as you say, the greatest ever winning run, and perhaps the deepest pool of talent Wales have ever been able to draw upon, which I know has been a priority Warren Gatland and his coaching team over the last couple of years, because, of course, in 2015, by the time Wales reached the quarterfinals, the squad was decimated by injury, and they were putting some pretty inexperienced guys in there. So the fact now they've built this almost 2 teams worth of talent, you've got 2 15s that could arguably take to the field. The one thing I think is just making Welsh fans a little bit nervous is still there is that inability to score tries in great numbers. They scored the fewest tries in the Six Nations despite the fact they won the Grand Slam. And I think what haunts a lot of Welsh fans is that game against Australia 4 years ago in the pool stages, where they had a 2-man advantage for the best part of 13 minutes and could not get over the line. But having said that, they're playing a style of rugby now that does win World Cups. Most World Cups have been won by teams with a world-class defence and a world-class goal kicker, and Wales have got both those things at the moment. So if it comes down to a tight one, you'd have to back Wales under or against most opposition at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny, just going back to what you said there at the start about how, is it just the Wales psyche that you're always maybe looking to pick out something that isn't going too well? I think we feel it over in Ireland as well, having beaten the All Blacks back last November, and all of a sudden the main question was, God, are we peaking a little bit too early here before the Rugby World Cup? And, with the way the Six Nations went, a lot of people mightn't have been wrong saying that. Now, when I was chatting to Shane, we spoke of 2011 and the kind of big regret about how that all ended, having done so well, having beaten Ireland in the quarter-final, got to the semis, and just having pretty much let themselves down really against France, played the better rugby but just didn't come out the right side of the scoreline. Yeah. How big a missed chance it was. This year round, you have Australia and Fiji in the pool. It's not a vintage Australia team by any stretch of the imagination. If you win that pool, you're playing probably the runner-up of England, Argentina or France. You're probably thinking it's going to be Argentina or France. It does open up a pretty clear path for a team like Wales to get into another semi-final. Even not thinking too far ahead or being cocky, realistically, I think at the moment they should be expecting to beat those teams, shouldn't they?
Like you say, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but you look at the bare statistics, and you're right, this Australian team is probably not as good as it was 4 years ago when Wales weren't able to get over the line in the pool stages then. Fiji, as always, are an unknown quantity. I mean, their squad on paper is phenomenal. The individual players they have, is breathtaking and can frighten Tier 1 nations, as Wales discovered in 2007 when they expected to beat them before getting knocked out in spectacular fashion. So Wales will not be remotely complacent against Fiji. I know they struggle to put together a tournament rugby over the course of 5, 6, 7 games, and they're lacking a defence coach at the moment, but Wales will not be taking that game lightly. But as you say, in terms of current standings, in terms of current form, Wales should look to beat both of those sides and top the pool. And then, as you say, it's potentially Argentina, potentially France, potentially England, because as we've seen over recent World Cups, England do have the capacity to implode or to play within themselves at World Cups. And it's almost a mirror of 2011 when the fact that Wales lost the opening game to South Africa, but then Ireland beat Australia, it opened that so-called Northern Hemisphere path.
Yeah, and it just flipped everything round.
Wales they don't fear Northern Hemisphere teams because they've got the physicality to deal with them. Over the course of Warren Gatland's 12-year tenure, the teams they feared have been, New Zealand, as everyone does, but Australia with Wales have been the bogeymen until they ended that 13-game unbeaten run against them. It was almost like they had this huge psychological sign over them. They just could not beat Australia, regardless of how fancied Australia were going into those games. Wales just seemed to sink into self-doubt. But hopefully, having beaten them in the last set of November internationals, hopefully they've overcome that psychological hurdle, and it shouldn't haunt them anymore.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next. On that Australia game from November, as you mentioned, it was a run of 13 straight defeats against the Wallabies for Wales until they won. And it kind of brings back to what you were saying earlier about how not really scoring too many tries. It was a 9-6 win on the day last November. You're going to take it when it comes, though. Is it really that, are you kind of unsure? Maybe have they kind of broken that glass ceiling of, now we can beat the Southern Hemisphere teams, or is it still going to hang over them a little bit? They did have a lot of trouble actually beating Australia on the day. Is it something that they're still going to kind of have in the back of their heads that it's a Southern Hemisphere team? you're almost giving them a few points of a head start?
I think it took a long time for them to rid themselves of that inferiority complex, if you like. But I think they'll have looked at, certainly the last Australia game, when they played South Africa, and they picked two heavy guys in the midfield. And they didn't really get anywhere because they weren't getting much front foot ball. Neither of them are particularly quick, Karevi and Kurandrani. And I think Wales would have looked at that and think if they're going to persevere with that, Wales can contain that, because they go well against the big hitters like the Englands and the South Africans, who perhaps haven't got the invention of Australian teams of the past. And I think that is arguably what frightened Wales. The amount of times they lost in the last minute to a bit of magic from a Curly Beale or a Matt Gitto or a Bernard Foley. So I think if Australia are going to beat Wales in the pool, they're going to have to revert to their second playmaker style, where they do stick a fly half or a playmaker in the 12 shirt, or certainly in the 15 shirt. Because that's what's always spooked Wales. They've got this watertight defence against teams that go one at runners or run off nine a lot. South Africans who just try and batter down that door. But when they come up against a team with trick plays, certainly Australia and Ireland to an extent under Joe Schmidt, that's when they sometimes get that defence unpicked.
From what we saw in the Six Nations, the key factors for Wales, accuracy was absolutely brilliant. It was a powerful game, good kicking, real traditional type of rugby. You mentioned one of the weaknesses being maybe they're not creating enough, they're not scoring enough tries. The style of play, it's very attritional, confrontational. Is it particularly conducive to tournament rugby, where you're going to be playing a game a week? Sometimes it's going to be a 6-day turnaround even. It seems like the kind of style where you are going to pick up injuries along the way, and it's something we would have seen with Ireland in 2015, that when they played against France, they lost so many bodies. It just took such a physical toll that they were wiped for a quarter-final. Is that a worry for Wales, that they just play such a physical game that they actually could just rack up a few too many injuries along the way?
Well, I think that's definitely something that's been on their mind, because you can see that they've addressed that in the 4 years since the last World Cup, because in 2015 they were absolutely decimated by injuries. We saw the fact when they played England in the pool stages, they lost three of their three-quarter line in the space of 10 minutes. The forward pack kind of held up pretty well, other than Scott Baldwin, who got knocked out against South Africa. I don't think the forwards picked up any serious injuries, but backline, you had wingers playing in the centre, you had scrum halves playing on the wing, which actually worked to their favour against England with that spectacular try. But I think they realised then that the level beneath their first 15 wasn't good enough. And that's what they've worked on in the 4 years since. And now they genuinely have two 15s. They have players fighting for every position on the park pretty much. And I think that means that you will see a lot more rotation during the pool stages, to try and spare those injuries, to try and spare the likes of Alan Wynne-Jones having to front up and play 70, 80 minutes every time. During the Six Nations, when they played France and Italy first up, they took a 31-man squad to France. First of all, they went to Paris, and then they went to Nice in between the French and the Italy games, to try and replicate that feel of a World Cup, as you say, playing two games in the space of 6 days. And they pretty much picked a separate 15 for the Italy game. I think there were 4 players who retained their places from the French game. And they were criticised for that at the time, because they limped to victory over Italy, didn't get the bonus point which many thought they'd have needed. But ultimately, as we saw in the final mix-up, it didn't matter. So I think they probably are concerned about picking up injuries, but given the work they've done in deepening that talent pool over the last 4 years, they are definitely in a better position to cope if a few key men go down. But the one guy they do not want to lose is Alan Wynne-Jones. I mean, you'll have seen from the other side of the Irish Sea just what a talisman he's become, and I think it's exaggerating it to say it rests on his shoulders, but if you were to lose someone of his calibre with his leadership, it would be a hammer blow to Wales.
Yeah, he just has that aura about him, like, I suppose, the Paul O'Connell figure for Wales that we would have had down the years. In terms of personnel, one man that hasn't featured over the last year or so but does look to be back to fitness is Taulupe Faletau. Is he going to have a bit of difficulty forcing his way into a back row that was absolutely outstanding during the Six Nations?
It's astonishing, isn't it? Sam Warburton retires at the age of 27. Taulupe Faletau, who for, I'd say, 2 or 3 years was Wales' best individual player. Both of them have been missing. Taulupe through injury and Sam through retirement. As we said, they just didn't seem to miss them at all. To the extent, when we were having back row conversations during the Six Nations, Faletau's name almost didn't come up because there's such an embarrassment of riches in Wales. And that, as you say, is going to be Warren Gatland's biggest headache, bar none. The guys have just had this grueling fitness camp in Switzerland where they've been training at altitude and really putting themselves through the ringer. And that squad has got to be reduced by about 10 players by the time he names his final World Cup squad. And you look at that back row, Faletau, Moriarty, Navidi, Justin Tipuric, Aaron Shingler, who's been out for the best part of 12 months, but was one of Wales' best players prior to that. They haven't given up on Ellis Jenkins, who's, making his way back from a serious injury. So there is some serious talent there. And then on the fringes, a guy, Aaron Wainwright, who 12 months ago, or 18 months ago, was playing semi-professional rugby, and now all of a sudden has got himself in a mix with some real powerhouse performances off the bench. So, to answer your question, I think if Taulupe Faletau's fit, he's in. But what that will mean is someone else who's probably in the form of their lives and any other time would have been a walk-in might miss out.
And also as well then, Warren Gatland. The Gatland factor has to be something as well because it's his final campaign and there's going to be an enormous amount of attention on him. And I think over the years, we probably saw it on Lions tours as well, he has absolutely thrived and his teams have thrived when he takes that bit of pressure on himself and he takes the media spotlight on himself and he deflects it off the team and allows them to go about their business. I'm absolutely certain it's going to happen again during the World Cup when every single press conference is going to be, it's your final pool game of a World Cup, quarter-final arrives, this might be your final game. I can see him taking on a lot of that pressure, and do you think that the team can thrive off that if he just deflects it away from them?
Yeah, I think so. He's become a master at it, hasn't he? And it's over time, he's become less and less controversial. There were times early in his Wales coaching tenure where he deliberately lob a grenade into a press conference, and it was all strategic. It was often to take pressure, as you say, away from the players. But over time, I think he's mellowed a bit, and he says less, and he tries to create less scandal unless he thinks it's in his interest to do so. A notable example being when he highlighted Kyle Sinclair's indiscipline before the England game this year, and lo and behold, Kyle Sinclair gets the old shepherd's crook after giving away 2 penalties and nearly gets yellow carded. So I think when it matters, he'll drop something in that he thinks it might get into the mind of a referee or an opposition player. But by and large, he seems to have mellowed a little bit. Whether that's with age or not, I don't know. But the one time he did get kind of quite spiky was on the last Lions tour to New Zealand when he felt, rightly or wrongly, that the New Zealand press treated him unfairly and undermined him and ridiculed him. And I saw it almost like the old Warren Gatland coming to the fore there, struggling to contain his emotions. And I think it serves his team better when he does contain his emotions and just keeps things on an even keel. But I think the fact this is now his 3rd World Cup, and not only Warren Gatland, but the entire coaching team, Rob Howley, Robin McBride, Neil Jenkins, they've all been there since 2008. So there is a consistency there and sort of a number of lessons learned, and history will be applied. You could argue 2 ways. Either that they're stale and the players haven't heard new voices in 12 years, or that they're now at the point where they've learned and absorbed everything from 2 previous World Cup campaigns, and this represents their best chance ever.
And on the Gatland legacy, he's obviously won so much at Wales. In terms of the public over there, how do they look upon Warren Gatland? Where is he kind of held in the kind of pantheon of great Welsh rugby coaches? I'm thinking the likes of Carwyn James or someone like that. How do the public view Warren Gatland?
Do you know what? It's really mystifying because there was a period where, for whatever reason, the public didn't warm to Warren Gatland. He can be quite a dour Kiwi, and there was that initial period where they played a very attritional brand of rugby that was kind of pejoratively referred to as Warren Ball, and he absolutely hates that word, or that, whatever you want to call it, that phrase. He despises it because he thinks it's reductive and it means he's got no imagination as a coach, and that he just gets big men running at holes and breaking down defences until bodies tire and gaps appear. And from a personal point of view, having watched his teams over the years, I think that is reductive, and there is a lot more to Warren Gatland than Warren Ball in inverted commas. But you mentioned Carwyn James, and I think there is almost this romantic feeling in Wales. You know, we still hark back to the 70s, the fleet-footed, jinking runners, the Phil Bennetts, the Barry Johns, as though you can compare the modern game in any way to the game that was played in the 70s. It is a completely different game now. It is, you know, the collisions are bigger, the players are stronger. You have to play a certain way to open up what are now a lot of rugby league-style defences. So I think over time, the public's attitude to him has softened. There are some people who will worship at the altar of Warren Gatland long after he's gone. There are some who think he won by pragmatic means but not by romantic means. But I think over the course of 12 years, you know, the balance has swung in his favour. And maybe people will appreciate him a lot more when he's gone, because you've spoken about his legacy. I mean, it is an absolutely incredible record. 3 Grand Slams, a Six Nations campaign, a World Cup semi-final, 2 undefeated Lions tours as head coach. You know, there aren't many, if any, coaches in world rugby that have got a CV to match. And you can probably include Steve Hansen in that, because Steve Hansen has got the best raw materials in the world to work with. So I think, you know, as time goes by, and depending on what happens in this World Cup, he will be regarded as one of the finest, if not the best coach Wales has ever had.
And one final question, Ross. What's the gut telling you versus what is the head telling you?
It's so tough, isn't it, to be, you know, you've got to, obviously in our profession, Neil, you've got to be objective and as unbiased as you can get away with, but 2011 was the one, and you spoke to Shane about this, that was the one that got away. That was the one where I felt Wales came in under the radar. No one was expecting them to do much. You know, they won the Grand Slam in 2012. They won the Grand Slam in 2008, but hadn't done much since then. I think they'd come 4th in 3 consecutive Six Nations. So no one was expecting them to do much, and they just snuck up under the radar. Should have beaten South Africa, beat Ireland convincingly then, sorry to remind you of that, in the quarter-final. And then you've mentioned the French game. You know, despite the fact Sam Robinson got sent off, they still should have won that. And they'd have faced a side then in New Zealand who hadn't won a home World Cup, hadn't won a World Cup since '87, and did choke a little bit against France. So people still cling to that as, was that the moment? Now, this World Cup is different. We're coming into it as the second best team in the world rankings, as Grand Slam champions, so there's no element of surprise with Wales. You know, they'll be hunted, and other teams will know what to expect from them. But sometimes that can work in teams' favours, you know, and I think if they go into it with a kind of positivity that you've mentioned, you know, if they expect to beat Australia and Fiji in the group, then they've got a path to the final they shouldn't fear. There's no teams that would lie before them that they should fear. But you just, you know, you look at the other teams in it. New Zealand is still the favourites, as they should be. Ireland, as you mentioned, it looked as though they may have peaked too soon, but I would never underestimate a Joe Schmidt coach team, and he'll definitely have learned the lessons from the Six Nations and put things in place to address them. So I suppose I'm being a typical Welshman. I'm allowing my heart to flutter a little bit and my pulse to quicken as the tournament approaches, but I'm trying to keep my feet on the ground at the same time.
Ross Harries, thanks a million for joining us on Land of the Rising Scrum.
My pleasure.